Hello everyone, this is Shankha, and in this video I'm going to explain the basic Spring Core annotations and see demo for each one. So first one is auto-wired, and it says used to inject the dependency into a variable of a particular type. So let's see what this means with the demo. So let's create a new project and let's call it demo, and the description is Spring Core annotations demo. Click on next. Don't need any starters, so click on finish. Alright, so let's first create an interface and call it person, and I'm going to create this inside home.demo.model package. Click on finish, and say let's create a class and call it student, and let's add an interface person. Let's just click on finish. Let's say implements person, right? And private, say string name equals to person, or rather let's just override the toString method and let's return person, or rather student, and let's create another class, call it employee, and person, finish, and let's copy this and let's paste it here and say employee. Alright, so let's create another class, call it config, and put it inside home.demo.config folder, and say @configuration, and say auto-wired and private person, and let's create a bean and say public void test, and say system.out.println, say person is plus person. Okay, so what we did is we created an interface called person, and we have two classes here, student and employee, which implement person, which are of person type, and we are creating another file called config, or another Java class called config, and we are trying to inject a type of person into this variable person. And this auto wired means we are trying to inject a type of person into this variable, but we are not defining. We have two objects, or we have two implementations for person, and we are not defining which implementation we want to inject into this particular variable person. And let's see how this behaves and what happens when we run this. This is gonna fail. This is not gonna run successfully. So let's see. So one is Spring Boot app. Okay, so the message. So what is the description? Fill person in com.demo.config. Config required a bean of type person that could not be found. So we need to specify a bean of the type person. So how do we specify a bean of the type person? Let's create a bean of the type person. Say @bean, and say public person, say person bean, and let's return new, say student. Let's see what happens. Now let's run this. So person is student. So what happened is, for the first time, Spring did not know which type of person to inject into this variable. So it threw an exception. Now that it has a bean of type student, so it knows there is only one bean of type person, and which is of a class student, and so it injects that particular object or that particular bean into this variable person. And so this is what we get, the result. Person is student. Now let's have employee here and see what happens. Okay, so person is employee. Alright, so that is how dependency injection works. So this is dependency injection by type. So let's say we have another bean which is of the type person, but it returns a student object, and say person bean 1. So let's see what happens. Now see Spring. Now we have two beans inside the application context which is of the type person, and we are asking Spring to inject an object which is of the type person into this variable person. So we are just trying to confuse Spring, and it will definitely throw an exception. Yep. So it says two beans were found of the type person. So let's do one thing. Let's just create, name this as person. Let's see what happens. So what I did is I created, if we don't specify this, then whatever method name we specify, Spring creates a bean with this particular name as a bean name. But since I've specified person, so it created a bean with the name person and mapped it to an object of student. And since the name of this particular variable is also person, so it did dependency injection by name, because it found a bean of the type person, and its name was same as the variable name of this one. So it injected this particular object or this particular bean into this variable, and that is how dependency injection by name works. So let's go to the next annotation. It's @component, and what does it say? Used to tell Spring to register a bean of the class. So let's remove this. So this is again gonna throw an exception, since we don't have any bean of the type person, the Spring container. So what does it say? Field person in form.demo.config required a bean of type person that could not be found. So we don't have a bean. So how do we tell Spring to create a bean of a particular class? We can either do this @bean inside a configuration file, or we can just annotate @component on top of a class to tell Spring create a bean of this particular class. So what Spring is going to do is create a bean of type person and inject an object of student, and name that bean as student. So let's see what happens when we run this. So person is student, since we created a bean of student. So that is how we can annotate a class as component and create a bean of that particular class, rather ask Spring to create a bean of that particular class. So let's see the next annotation. It says @bean, which we have already used. And what does it say? It says used to manually create bean of a class for which the source code is not accessible and the class is not already inside the Spring container. So when we annotate a class as @component, we bring it inside the Spring container, because we ask Spring to create a bean of this particular class inside the application context. So we bring this class inside the Spring container. But what if we don't have access? What if this is a third-party class and we don't have access to this particular source code, but we want to bring it inside the Spring container? So what we do is we can create a bean of it manually by having a bean @bean annotation and then returning a type of that particular class. So public person say set bean and return new employee. So let's assume this employee is a third-party class and we don't have access to this source code. So how do we create a bean of that particular class? We create a bean by specifying @bean inside a configuration class and then returning a type, an object rather, of employee. So let's run this and see. So we have this person is employee. So let's go to the next annotation. It says qualifier. Alright, so, and yeah, what is the definition of qualifier? Used to specify the name of a bean for dependency injection when more than one bean qualifies for dependency injection. So let's remove this and let's have this notice component, and let's have this notice component as well. So what we just did is person is an interface and student is a type of person, and it is, we ask Spring to create a bean of that class, and employee is also a type of person, and we ask Spring to create a bean of this class as well, and we are trying to inject a type of person into this particular variable called person. So Spring has two beans, one is student and one is employee, and it doesn't know which one to wire into this person type, so it is going to throw an exception. So what does it say? Okay, so it says that field person in com.demo.config required a single bean but two were found, employee and student. So both employee and student qualify to be injected into this particular person type, and Spring doesn't know which one to inject. So we can do something like qualifier and give the name of the bean. So let's say student, and let's run this now. Okay, so now it knows which bean to inject if there are more than one. If there is more than one bean that qualifies to be injected, so it knows that it has to inject a bean with the name student. So it injects student into this particular person variable. So let's change it to employee and see what happens. Okay, we have person is employee. Alright, so let's go to the next annotation. @primary. What does it say? Used to specify object of a particular class as a primary choice for dependency injection when more than one bean qualifies for dependency injection. So it basically works similar very similar to this qualifier annotation, but it's a bit different from qualifier. So let's see how it differs from qualifier. And there's one more line: @qualifier is given higher preference when both @primary and @qualifier are present. So let's see how it works. So let's remove this qualifier and let's run this again. It should throw an exception. Okay, we have this exception, two beans were found. So let's mark one bean as primary. So what we are basically doing is we are basically telling Spring that if more than one bean qualifies to be injected, more than one bean of person type qualifies to be injected, then we should treat this bean or student bean as a primary bean. This should be the first choice for injection. So let's see what happens now if you run this. Okay, so we have person is student because student is our primary bean. Now what if we have both primary and qualifier annotations? So we have primary as student, but we have qualifier as, say, employee. see what happens. So employee is preferred over student because qualifier is preferred over student. That's what this says. Qualifier is given higher preference when both primary and qualifier are present. Okay, so let's go to the next annotation, @value, and it says that used to inject value into a variable. It may be injected from an external property such as application.properties file. Right, so let's see how it works. So let's just comment this out, and say @value, and say default app name, and say private string app name, and say system.out.println app name is plus app name. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to inject this value into this string variable. So let's see what it returns, how it works. Okay, app name is default app name. Now let's do one thing. Let's go to application.properties file, and let's set the application dot name equals to say demo spring app, and let's copy this, and let's say let's see what happens now. Let's run this. So it says demo spring app, so it is taking the value from an external property file, which is application.properties. So let's go to the next annotation, depends on. So what does it say? It says used to specify the order of bin creation, bin on which a particular bin depends on will be created first. Let's see this in action. Let's remove this. And let's create a bean, or rather say private string, say value, and let's create a bean, say public string, say b1, say return hello. And let's create another, so say return value plus, right, it's a value equals to value plus, rather let's make this void, and say value plus equals to hello. And let's have another bean of type void, and call this b2 and say world. Let's print the value. let's see what happens. Let's say let's make this an empty string. So let's run this again. So first this bean was created, and inside this bean we did value equals to value plus hello. So it's setting the value of value as hello, and then this bean was created. So the value of value was already hello, and then it added world to it. So just let's switch the bean creation order and see what happens. Okay, so first this bean was created because it comes first, and then this bean was created. So first we have world and then we have hello. But if we do something like red depends on say b1, let's see what happens now. Okay, now it says hello world. So no matter where we define this bean, it depends, because it depends on b1. So b1 will always be created first, and then b2 would be created, because b2 depends on b1. So first b1 will be created and then b2 would be created. So we are controlling the order of creation of the bean using depends on annotation. So let's see the next annotation. It's at the red scope, and what does it say? Used to specify the scope of a bean. So let's see how this works. Okay, so let's just remove all these things. Let's remove this, and say the red scope, and let's say singleton. Uncomment this, and let's remove this, and let's have the application context auto-wired. So application context is basically the Spring container, and an implementation of it is provided by Spring, and we are just auto wiring and injecting the dependency into this particular variable, which is of the type application context. And say student s1 equals to add context dot get bean student, and we would need to cast it to student, and let's copy this, paste this here, and then say s2 and system.out.println s1 equals to s2. So basically basically singleton scope means for one bean ID there will always be one object of a class attached to that particular bean ID. So whenever we whenever we try to get an object using using the bean name or the bean ID, it will return the same object. So here what we are doing is we are trying to get the bean or get the object of student class using the bean name student. So for this, since this class on top of this class we have annotated this other scope and put your singleton, so that means that whenever we call the bean which is named as student, it will always return the same object. So this should return true. Yep. So let's change the scope to prototype. Prototype always returns a different object, a new object, whenever we try to get the object using the bean name or the bean ID. So this should return false. So that is how we can set the scope for a string bean using the other scope annotation. So let's see the next annotation, other profile. What does it say? Used to specify the active profile for which the bean should be created. Okay, so say other profile and say dev and let's have one more dash dev, okay, and say dash QA. So we have two profiles, one is dev and one is QA, and we are saying that a bean of this class should only be created when we are using the dev profile. So for that we can just mention the active profile. Say dev and we don't need this anymore, so let's get rid of it and say percent is plus percent, and let's do one more thing. Control C and Control V, and we are saying that if the profile is QA, then we set this bean. Otherwise, if the profile is dev, we set student bean. So let's run this. Now our active profile is dev, so it should create a bean of student and not of employee. So let's run this. So portion is student. Let's change this to QA and let's run this again. So portion is employee. So depending on which profile we are choosing or which profile we are running, or depending on the current profile, active profile, it is creating the bean, and we can do that using other profile annotation. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you for watching.